Hey everybody, Mr. Troy here. Hold on just a second. That's better. All right, you ready? It's time for math with Mr. Troy. Dance along. All right, I've got a quick video for you today on functions. Now, you have undoubtedly studied functions before in your Algebra 1 class, but this is a reminder. A function is a rule that assigns any input to a unique output. So, here is a function named f that takes x as its input, and to figure out its output, it does 3 times that input minus 7. So 3x minus 7 is the rule to take the input x and to get an output f of x. Now, you've definitely seen it like this. And if you saw it with an f of x, it's possible your teacher said, oh, just think of it like y. Sure, but f of x gives us a nice way to think about things. So if I'm asked for f of 7, well, if f of x is 3 times x minus 7, then f of negative 7 is 3 times negative 7 minus 7, which is, of course, negative 21 minus 7, which is negative 28. So you probably did something like this in an Algebra 1 course. You may not have looked at more abstract things in an Algebra 1 course. So let's talk about this rule. This function's job is to take an input, multiply it by 3, and then subtract 7. So this function is going to take the input 5z. It's going to multiply it by 3 and subtract 7, which is 15z minus 7. No like terms there, so nothing we can simplify. So what you are plugging in to the function for its input is whatever is inside the parentheses. It's called the argument or the input of the function. So you would take 3 times the input, in this case it's 4 minus 3t, and then subtract 7. So that would be 12 minus 9t when we do our distribution, minus 7, which is 5 minus 9t. Easy enough, I hope. Okay, so moving on. You need to think of a function as having a job. So this function's job is to take an input. That's how it always starts. It's going to square it, subtract 2 times that input, then subtract 8. So once you know that, the only real issue is order of operations. For f of negative 7, you would do the input squared. Since the input is negative 7, you need to do negative 7 times negative 7, which is going to be positive 49, minus 2 times the input, minus 8, or 49 plus 14 minus 8, which I think is 55. I've been wrong before. So for the next one, we're going to take 5z and square that, subtract 2 times that, and then subtract 8. And this one's actually not going to simplify down at all. So 25z squared minus 10z minus 8. No like terms, so it doesn't simplify. Okay, now the last one is one that is commonly missed. So it's going to be input squared minus 2 times the input minus 8. The part where people go wrong is in squaring 4 minus 3t. Everyone always gets the 16, and people usually get the plus 9t squared. But remember, you're foiling. So you have to multiply the outers and the inners together, and it happens twice. So the outers and the inners are the same, that's why it's twice. So this is actually going to be minus 24t. Moving on, minus 8 plus 6t minus 8. We want to give our answer in standard form, so we want to say 9t squared. And then I think we have minus 18t, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe that the positive 16 here and the negative 8 and the negative 8 cancel out. So I think that's our final answer. So we have to go a little bit further with the definition of the function. There are a couple of rules that a function must conform to. First of all, every input must have exactly one output. So you learned this in Algebra 1 as the vertical line test. A vertical line that hits a graph in more than one place means that that graph is not a function. You also need to learn that algebraically. So for example, if I was solving this to say, is y a function of x, I would be getting y by itself. And remember that thing from earlier on in algebra where when you take the square root you have plus or minus? So what this means is, if I plug in a particular x value, I would have plus or minus 2 different answers for my y value. And that is not allowed. You're not allowed to plug in one x value and get 2 different y values. Okay? So the first rule is every input must have exactly one output. The next rule is that it is acceptable for some outputs to be used more than once in a function. So it is okay that this graph doesn't pass the horizontal line test. We'll talk later on about what that means for what's called its inverse, but for now, a function is allowed to have the same y value multiple times. And finally, it's acceptable for some outputs not to be used at all. This graph never hits -1. That's okay. There is no rule in functions saying that every output has to be used. So there's a little bit of vocab here. Instead of saying all of the input values that may be used over and over and over again, because that doesn't roll off the tongue, we just say the domain. So the domain is all of the x values that you may use, and the range is all of the output values that result. All right, folks, that's all I have for you today. Hang in there, have a good one, do your math homework.